Imagine a machine, an 85-foot behemoth designed to conquer the most desolate continent on Earth. It weighed 37 tons, a self-contained rolling laboratory. And then it got stuck. Not in deep snow, not in a crevasse. It got stuck because its tyres, its brand new, cutting-edge, smooth-treaded aircraft tyres, couldn't grip the ice. So within weeks of arriving on the Antarctic continent in 1940, this monumental engineering marvel, the snow cruiser, was abandoned. Its crew hiked away, leaving it behind, a peculiar, misplaced ghost in the most unforgiving wilderness imaginable. A bizarre historical footnote, right? Except that wasn't the end of its story, not even close. Because like a recurring nightmare, it keeps coming back.
The initial assessment of the snow cruiser's design parameters indicated a significant oversight regarding traction dynamics on glacial surfaces. Dr. Thomas C. Poulter, lead engineer, prioritized insulation and payload capacity over effective propulsion on snow and ice. The decision to utilize smooth, low-pressure aircraft tires, while advantageous for distributing weight, proved catastrophic on anything but compacted snow. The vehicle's four-wheel drive system was rendered effectively inert within kilometers of its initial deployment point near Little America III. The crew, led by Dr. Paul Sipple, made attempts to mitigate the issue through chains and even improvised tire shoes, but these were insufficient. The directive to abandon the vehicle came from the United States Antarctic Service, prioritizing personnel safety and the expedition's broader scientific objectives over the recovery of a non-functional asset. It was covered with snow, marked and left, ostensibly, forever.
Forever. That's a strong word for Antarctica. Because 23 years later, in 1958, an international expedition led by US Navy personnel was conducting scientific traverses. They weren't looking for the snow cruiser. It was just there, like it had been spat back out by the ice itself. And it wasn't just found. It was found exactly as it had been left, perfectly preserved, almost defiant in its resurrection. The initial reports described a kind of uncanny encounter, a ghost from an earlier age. But here's where it gets truly strange. The logs from that expedition mention its discovery, but then nothing. No explanation for how it resurfaced, no analysis of the surrounding ice, just a casual noting of its presence, then back to the research, almost as if its re-emergence was an expected inconvenience, not a miracle.
The official log of the 1958-59 IGY expedition details the rediscovery of the snow cruiser on January 29, 1958. It was located approximately 2 miles from the site of its original abandonment, partially exposed. The interior was reportedly found in excellent condition, remarkably preserved, down to the scientific instruments and provisions left behind by Sippel's team. This preservation is significant. Subsurface snow and ice conditions, even in static regions, are subject to thermal cycling and compaction. For a vehicle of that mass to remain structurally intact, let alone to resurface relatively unscathed after decades, is highly anomalous. There's no readily available geological explanation for such a precise reemergence. Furthermore, the expedition made no concerted effort to excavate or study the cruiser further. The priority was logistical support for established scientific stations, not archaeological recovery. The casualness of its recording suggests either extreme focus on primary objectives or an unspoken understanding of Antarctica's peculiar properties that isn't typically conveyed in open records.
So, it wasn't just found, it was found too perfectly. The ice, by all accounts, should have warped it, crushed it, or simply buried it deeper. But it didn't. Instead, it seems to have presented it again, almost like a recurring motif. This isn't just a lost object. It's an object caught in a repeating cycle of disappearance and reappearance. And that's where the stories begin to diverge from the official narrative. Because when the cruiser was initially abandoned, its crew left behind something critical. Thousands of gallons of aviation fuel in drums, meticulously placed around it, fuel that was vital for the onward journey and the mission itself, fuel that was not found with the cruiser in 1958.
The fuel drums, approximately 5,000 gallons of aviation gasoline, were a critical component of the original expedition's forward operational plan. Sippel's crew documented their placement around the snow cruiser with explicit instructions for their eventual retrieval. Yet, when the cruiser was rediscovered in 1958, these drums were conspicuously absent. The official explanation posits that the drums either drifted away independently due to ice movement or were completely buried beyond detection. However, given their relatively high density and fixed placement, a complete, untraceable disappearance of such a large volume of material strains credulity. The ice sheet's movement is generally predictable in that region, and scattered debris fields would be expected. The clean absence suggests a more deliberate or inexplicable removal, or a failure of the ice itself to retain what it had been entrusted with. No subsequent recovery operations for these drums have ever been documented, nor has any debris field been located in subsequent surveys of the region.
The fuel wasn't just gone, it had vanished without a trace, almost as if the ice itself had consumed it, or perhaps was merely borrowing it. This pattern of a thing taken, then given back, then, not quite complete, starts to paint a picture not of natural forces, but of something far more deliberate. The snow cruiser wasn't just lost, it was being retained. Its first reappearance was an anomaly. Its second, however, solidified its place as something truly spectral. Because after 1958, the snow cruiser vanished again, and this time it was harder to dismiss.
Following its 1958 rediscovery, the snow cruiser remained visible for a period. Subsequent expeditions in the early 1960s reportedly sighted it, albeit with increasing snow accumulation. However, by 1965, during Operation Deep Freeze, a specific aerial reconnaissance mission was tasked with locating the cruiser, partly out of historical interest, partly due to persistent, unsubstantiated reports of its interior being accessible and remarkably preserved. Despite extensive aerial and ground surveys in the vicinity of its known coordinates, the snow cruiser could not be located. It had, by all objective accounts, disappeared for a second time. This vanishing, coming after its initial, improbable reemergence, is where the scientific community's interest wanes, replaced by conjecture. Glacial creep rates in that specific sector of the Ross Ice Shelf are well documented. A vehicle of the snow cruiser's dimensions would not typically be resubmerged so completely or rapidly without leaving significant surface deformation. Its clean disappearance, after being seen for several years post-1958, is perhaps the most unsettling data point. It defies conventional understanding of glacial mechanics and ice sheet dynamics.
It's not just an object that got lost. It's an object that resurfaced, then vanished again, seemingly swallowed whole by the very landscape it defied. This isn't just geology. This is an active, almost sentient process of reclamation. Antarctica doesn't just bury its secrets. It plays with them. It hides them, reveals them, only to snatch them back again, like a child with a favourite perplexing toy. The snow cruiser isn't just a failed experiment buried under miles of ice. It's a recurring echo, a reminder that sometimes the most profound mysteries aren't about what's hidden, but about what insists on reappearing.
The current official status of the snow cruiser is unlocated, presumed buried. However, the persistent anecdotal reports from various expeditions over the decades, combined with the documented cycles of its visibility, lend credence to the idea that it remains within a dynamic, subsurface ice flow. The possibility of its eventual reemergence is not dismissed by some polar geophysicists, though the timing and conditions remain entirely unpredictable. The phenomenon of deep ice preservation and subsequent exhumation is not unheard of for smaller, lighter objects, but for a vehicle of this scale, it remains an outlier. Antarctica, in essence, operates on its own temporal and spatial logic. It is an environment that actively reclaims intrusions, not merely through erosion or burial, but through a kind of slow geological respiration. The snow cruiser, in this context, becomes a testament to the continent's profound, almost malevolent capacity to assimilate, conceal, and then, at its own enigmatic will, reveal. It serves as a persistent, unsettling reminder that in the deep South, some things are never truly lost, only held in reserve, awaiting their next bewildering reappearance.